Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Majestic Braided Wirework Bracelet. Now these bracelets will also be available for sale in my shop. You'll find a link in the description box down below, and while you're there you can also sign up to my newsletter so you don't miss any future updates. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make this bracelet, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to use. First of all, the wire I have is a regular round silver coated copper wire and the gauge is a 0.8mm. And then I'm using a 1.5mm leather cord and I'm just using a purple colour here. And the beads that we need are these 3mm rounds. Now the specific ones I'm using are some faceted purple coated hematite gemstone beads, and they match nicely with the leather cord, but of course you can mix and match your colours however you want to. Just make sure regardless what beads you're using, the holes are large enough to take the wire through. And I'm then going to use these ribbon ends to finish off the ends of the bracelet with, and they have these little loops in them where we can attach our findings. So I'm using a lobster claw clasp, an extender chain and a couple of jump rings, but of course you can use whatever kind of clasp you prefer. Now alongside the ribbon ends we also need some E6000 glue that's going to make the bond nice and strong. As for the tools, we first of all need some flush cutters so we can cut our wire. I'm using chain nose pliers and tweezer nose pliers to help manipulate the wire and for the jump rings. I'm going to be using a spring clamp here to help hold the wires in place while we're braiding. And I've also got some electrical tape that's going to help manage the wires and leather a little bit better. You don't have to have this, it can just make it a little bit easier to work with. Now you can always check out the description box below the video for the material list and useful links. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. So then the lengths of wires we'll need is 8 lengths here of about 35 centimeters each, and just make sure they don't have any kinks or bends in them. And of the leather cord, I've also got 2 lengths of 35 centimeters each. We then need to take all the lengths of wires and cord and put it through the spring clamp here, and I'm just leaving a few centimeters through so we have some tails. Now as for the pattern that we have is on either side I'm going to have a wire furthest out, and the next one in we have a leather cord on either side there, and then in the middle are just the remaining lengths of wires. So in total I have 6 lengths of wires in the middle, then the leather cord on either side, and then a wire at the very outer edge on both sides. So that is the pattern here, because obviously it's going to be symmetrical. You can kind of see we almost have a line down the middle and then the same on both sides in a mirrored image. Now what we're going to be doing is working with some of these lengths in groups as if they were one length to work with. So those are the outer 3 lengths on either side, which means the outer wire, the leather cord, and then the next wire in. That's going to be one group. And the same on the other side. And what I find can be handy while doing this is on the very end here, I've kind of traced them all the way down, and then I put a bit of tape around where the ends are just to help hold them all together. Otherwise the leather mainly can start to get a little bit wild, so it just makes it a little bit easier to work with. But like I said, you don't have to do that, you can easily do it without the tape as well. So now to start braiding here, so what I'm going to do first of all is just start on one side at a time, doesn't matter what side you start with, and I just have my wires here just kind of split down the middle a little bit. I also find the best way to think of this braid is it's almost as if we're doing a 3-strand braid on either side, and then in certain places we're just connecting it using some of the wires here. So just starting with one side, I'm just going to take the right one first. What I'm going to do is just separate out the wires a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is take the group of wires with the leather cord in, and I'm just going to put my fingers on it right up where it comes out from the spring clamp, and then just kind of pull it in over the middle of all the others over towards the other side. The most important thing with the groups with the leather cord is that you make sure the wires and the cord always lay flat next to each other so they don't overlap within the group. The next wire, which is the first one it's crossing over, I'm just going to let it come underneath and just pull it a bit further out. And then the next wire in, which is the 3rd length you could say in this group on the left side, I'm going to bring over the group with the leather and out to the same side as the other single wire. And this is basically the beginning of a 3-strand braid on this side. Now what we're going to do is bring the outer wire here back over the middle wire, which is right next to it, and then this becomes a new middle one, and then bring it into the middle there, just straighten it out, and just do that gently as well. Be careful we don't pull any other wire or cord through up here before we get a little bit further down with the braid. And I'm also not going to start adding beads in just yet. I like to just do a few rounds of my braids before I add beads in. Then I'm going to take the group with the leather cord, keep hold of that while I'm moving it over the one that we just brought into the middle, and then bring this one into the middle. Make sure that they keep lying flat next to each other with that leather cord in the middle of the 2 wires, and then we just get this nice little curve in it. And then to finish off this little section, I'm just going to take the very outer wire, which is a single wire, bring that up over the group with the leather cord, and into the middle to be the new middle one. So these are my first few movements, so don't worry about it looking a little bit messy up here because we're just getting started and kind of getting into the rhythm of it. But I'll then get all these wires in place for now, so I'm just going to kind of push them a little bit out of the way and move to the right side instead. And basically we want to do the exact same thing, except it's going to be mirrored. Now we also need to make this opposite to the first side here, so what I'm going to do is put my fingers on it again where it's coming out from the spring clamp, and then just start to move the group all the lengths together. Now this time underneath the other lengths, but still into the middle, and just kind of get that initial curve into it. Now as for the two single wires on this side, the first one that's right next to the group, before that came underneath on the other side, so this one needs to go over, which it already is, so I'm just going to bring that further out to the side. And the other one here needs to come underneath the group, so just bring it under gently and then bring that out to the side. And now we have our wires in position for the next movement in the 3-strand braid on the right side here. And the first thing we're going to do is just push up the one that's coming underneath a little bit first. Then I'm going to take the very outer length and bring it under that, because remember a braid is always over under, so basically do the opposite to what it was doing before. This one came over, so now it needs to come under, and then that's into the middle, and just flatten that back out. And then we need to bring the group towards the outside again, so put your fingers on it, and I like to put my fingers up here where we need to have the curve in place. That helps get the curve just as we want it, and this comes underneath the wire that we just brought into the middle, and the group becomes the new middle one. And the final length here is going straight out to the side. We need to bring that under the group and just back into the braid. So basically what we ended up with now is a 3-strand braid on either side, and the groups with the leather, they're both going out to the sides, and then the single wires here are all kind of wanting to cross over each other in the middle, which is what we want, because it's these wires we're going to use to basically connect everything in the middle before bringing them back out and continuing the 3-strand braids on the side. And it's really just the same principle in the middle here as everything else. You just want to constantly think over, under. So just have a look at everything. This very first one is coming underneath the previous place, so that means it needs to go over the next one and under the one after that. So just gently bring your wires through how we need to. And what you can also do is kind of push your wires against where they're going a little bit. So the first one here I'm pushing down a bit, and the second one pushing up a bit, before I then bring this length through, because it just gives a little bit more space, because obviously it's wire we're working with, so it reacts a bit differently than if it was fiber or cord of some sort. And then once we brought it through, we can kind of just flatten everything back out and just let the wires settle in a bit and find their place. And then as for the other one coming from the left there, what we need to do is again the opposite. So that one's coming over previously. That means the next one, it needs to go underneath, and again we can just lift that up a little bit, and the one after that just push it down. So basically pushing them in the opposite direction to where they're coming from. Bring that through so it goes under, over, and flatten everything back out. And then we can see that we've actually now interwoven all the wires here, over, under, so they are now connected in the middle, and you're kind of forming this little square or diamond or cross or whatever you want to think of it as. And we have the wires going back out to the sides, so obviously the wires have swapped sides, but that doesn't matter. What we now have is the 2 single wires again going out to the side, so we can now move back to whichever side you want to start with and do the 3-strand braid again. So I'm just going to start on the left. So before I move anything, I'm just going to push down that middle wire a little bit, and you can push up the one after that before I then take my group with the leather cord and put my finger on it where I want the curve to be. Bring them all together, flat next to each other there, through the 2 wires, so basically over, under, because that fits with the previous movements. So we've added a curve into that. Now you can straighten everything back out. And this is where I'm now also going to start adding beads in, because I feel like I've got enough of the braid going that I've kind of found the rhythm now. So before I make my next movement, I'm going to add a bead to the very outer wire here, so the single wire, let that drop all the way down, and then we're going to bring this wire over the other length. I'm just pushing that down a little bit, and then I'm making sure the bead stays in that outer corner as I'm bringing the wire over, and basically gets trapped in that outer corner there. Straighten the wire back out, and then I'm going to take the group with the leather, and we need to go over the wire that we just brought from the furthest left that we added the bead onto. And again, we need to then make sure we add a curve into this group. So put your finger where we want that curve, bring it back out to the side so it looks a little something like that. And then the next movement is again the outer single wire, but before I move that, I'm just going to add my bead, let it drop down into that corner, and then I'm going to bring this length that has the bead on over the one with the leather cord and into the middle there. So as you can see, once we're working with either side here, we're just making a basic 3-strand braid really. And I now have the group with the leather cord back out to the side, and the 2 single wires are going back into the middle, which is the position we need them in for the next little connection point as we did up here. So that means that side is ready. I need to go to the other side and repeat the same thing. So that means the first single wire here that's right next to the group, I'm going to push up a little bit, and the one that's furthest in the middle, I'm just going to push down a bit so we can bring this group straight through, making sure we get that curve where my fingers are, making sure all the lengths are nice and flat next to each other. Then we can straighten these back out. And now we need to move our outer single wire here, but before I do that, I'm going to add my bead, and then we need to bring it under the next one, because previously it went over. So following that over under pattern into the middle, smooth it out. And then here, I'm going to push it up a little bit because I then need to bring the group with the leather cord under it. Again, making sure we get that curve. So I hold my fingers where I want the curve to be, and then just bring the group back out to the side, and I can then flatten the lengths down again. And then the final movement, I'm going to add a bead to the outer length of single wire before I then bring it underneath the group and trap that bead in place in that outer corner there and into the middle. And you can see we have now ended up with this side looking just like the other side, just in a mirrored image really. And again, we have all the single wires in the middle ready to get intertwined so we can connect it. And what we're going to do is again just look at opposites. So I'm going to push up and down where I need to so I can open up and bring the wire through, straighten it back out a bit. And then the next wire here needs to obviously go over under in the opposite way. So we're basically intertwining all of them and creating that little square or diamond. So now we just got to go back to working with one side at a time. First of all, just push one wire down a bit, one wire up just against the wire that is crossing over and under. Bring the group with the leather cord through, making sure we get that curve, and then we can straighten our wires back out. Add our bead to the outer single length before we move it over the one next to it and into the middle of these 3 lengths that we're working with, and then bring the group back over the top of that and out to the side here. Get that curve in place. Add your bead to the remaining single wire in this little section here and bring that wire over the group, trap that bead in place so it looks a little something like that. So you can see this is now a repetition from the section right above it. And of course we just want to go to the other side and do the same. So first of all, I'm just going to push one wire up and the other down a bit just to open up some space so I can bring my group through, making sure they stay flat next to each other and get that curve in place. Straighten your wire back out, add a bead to the outer single wire, and then bring it underneath the next one in, making sure that bead gets trapped in place. Take the group, again put your finger on where we want that curve to be, bring it underneath the wire we just brought through, smooth everything out, add your bead to the single wire that we then need to bring underneath the group, trap that bead in place, bring it into the middle, and we then have our wires ready here so we can cross them over in the middle and then go back out to the sides and create the 3-strand braids along the sides. So you just want to keep doing this until you have the length that you need, obviously minus the clasp. So now I got all the way to the other end here. What we need to do is start to finish off the ends. So I'm going to take the ribbon end here and attach it to the end, but obviously we need to get rid of the excess wire and leather. So what I'm going to do is bring in my E6000 glue, because we want to cut these off, but we want to make sure they don't come undone. Obviously the wire will be fine, but the leather can kind of want to undo a little bit. So I'm going to add some glue to a toothpick, and then we can always use our actual ribbon end to see where we want it placed. Then I'm going to just add the glue literally right on top of the wire that's going to end up being inside of the ribbon end. And then once you've done that, of course, do it on the other end as well, and then leave this to dry before we cut through any of the wire and the cord. So now the glue is dried here, I'm going to go in and cut off the excess. So I'm going to take my flush cutters because we're cutting through the wire, and I want to cut basically right through the glue, so not on either side of the glue but actually through it. So just start from one side and go straight across like that. Remove the excess, and then we have a nice straight edge here. We can then attach our ribbon end, but before we do that we just need to add a bit more glue, because obviously otherwise this won't adhere to it. So I'm going to take my E6000, get a bit onto a toothpick, and then grab my ribbon end and place it inside, and I make sure to cover the inside walls here. We don't need to fill it up completely because obviously the actual end of the braid is going to go in, and we're going to clamp this down and it's just going to come spilling out the excess glue. But you just want to make sure to cover the inside walls. And then we just need to place it over the end here. And we now need to take our pliers and just start squeezing this down, because you can see on the sides it's open. So we just need to make sure to clamp it down so it's going to catch over the ends of the wire and the leather. So I like to put a finger on either side to hold it in place, because it can slip around while we're clamping it down. So I'm not clamping in one place and just doing a big push. I like to do it gently, so a little bit at a time. And when I'm almost all the way there, I just remove my fingers just to check it's still sitting in the middle where I want it to. And if you're happy with that, you can go in and do your final squeeze. Make sure it's really nice and tight. And I also like to go in from the sides and just close those up nicely like that. And of course you need to do the same on the other end, and we then have these little loops where we can attach our findings. Once I've then attached my clasp and extender chain, we just need to shape the bracelet so we can wear it. And I like to just go in and use my hands and fingers and start putting a curve into it. So don't go into one place and make a big bend, that'll put it out of shape, but rather slowly go from side to side, gradually adding a curve in. Go back and forth. You can also shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel. But the aim is just to get the two ends here closer together, so we can of course use the clasp. So it looks a little something like this, and the bracelet is now finished and ready to wear. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial for this Majestic Braided Wirework Bracelet. Now if you want to see more braided wirework designs, I have a whole playlist full of them. I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.